So there are different ideologies telling us what is the source of evil. According to national socialism, it's the Jews which are the source. According to you, it seems that basically all evil of the 20th century leads back to Darwinism. Isn't this a simplification?
Well, this is a technically and scientifically speaking a certain fact, because people like Hitler, Mussolini, Lenin and Stalin have themselves very clearly stated in their statements that their ideologies are based on Darwinism. And these names, these people are the most violent terrorists that the world has ever seen. They have caused great bloodshed all around the world. So they all say that their ideologies have stemmed from Darwinism. So this is not only a guess, but a scientific truth.
But isn't the reason for so much evil simply the fact that human nature is weak and people's desire for power, attraction to power, and isn't this maybe a much more basic reason for evil?
Yes, the things I have said, my argument is based on scientific, philosophical and sociological facts. It's a practical level of speaking about things, because we have seen the practices of all these terrorist activities and bloodshed in reality. Yes, of course, we have to acknowledge the fact that the weakness of human beings, their psychological disorders and problems, play a very important role too. You are right in saying that, but this weakness of human being and the psychological problems that they are facing are stemming from their religious weakness as well. They stem from their disbelief in God. So if people sincerely believe in God, and if they believe in His power, then such psychological problems, such weaknesses would not occur.
I want to stay with Darwinism. Darwinism is today considered as a scientific theory, not as an ethics. Even Dworkin, whom you also know, he said we shouldn't recognize Darwin concerning his views on ethical questions or political questions, but only on a scientific point of view. And in this way, Darwinism is just like a scientific theory, but not a whole explanation of the world.
It is very evident that Darwinism is a mock theory. It's not real. Even a child of 8 or 10 years of age would not believe in Darwinism when he or she is presented with the fossils which have been covered from the underground. We have in our hands 100 million petrified fossils, which prove us the fact that species on this earth have not changed in millions of years of time. If you look at a fossil of a tortoise or a frog, for example, which is petrified underground and which comes to us 100 million or 300 million years ago, you would see that it has gone through no change at all. It's the same as it was 300 million years ago. So this is the very basic fact that Darwinism is only a plot and it's a mock theory and it cannot be defended. Darwinism, for example, cannot explain the existence and the creation of a single cell of protein, for example. And similarly, when you look at a chromosome, you would see that a single chromosome contains a very vast bulk of information which is equal to that of a great library. Let's imagine that you have a library in England which is very big, and all that information which is stored in that library is coded in a single cell. So Darwinism can offer no explanations for such things. That's why it is an invalid theory.
A theory doesn't need to explain everything. A theory can explain something, and what Darwinism tries to explain are certain changes in beings which might develop into other beings, and not just because, as it's being in general said, that it's a survival of the fittest, but it's a question of how to adapt to your environment. and this adaptation to an environment has influence and changes the beings.
Charles Darwin, in his book Origin of Species, I would like to make a quotation from him. This is from page 170 and 280 from The Origin of Species. Darwin says that if species have evolved from one another into other species, why can't we come across any transitional forms? And in another quotation from The Origin of Species, Darwin asks himself this very basic question: why is nature not in a chaotic situation? Why is everything orderly, and why is nature perfect, and why is everything in its proper place? So Darwin cannot explain this perfectness, this perfection. And again, Charles Darwin states very clearly in The Origin of Species that in no geological levels and in no part of the underground underneath the earth we have come across any transitional form. Darwin cannot understand why they have been not able to find any transitional form. And he states very clearly that if no transitional form will be found, then my theory would be defeated. But this is not a defeat. This is a complete and very clear proof that this theory can no longer be valid, because we have in our hands 100 million fossils, and each of those fossils prove that this Earth has been created not through evolution but through creation.
But we found hundreds and different of skeletons, which we call, for example, Homo erectus and other ones, and they show a clear development, which is getting closer and closer to what we call today human being. So doesn't this indicate that before we became human beings actually did exist? There was another form of being which developed and became human being.
Of course, we know that there are animals which look like human beings, like gibbons, chimps, gorillas, and monkeys. But throughout history, since the beginning of time, such species have become extinct, and some species, some types of these animals became extinct. And in the underground, their fossils have been uncovered very naturally, and they look like human beings, that's true. But then they are not perfect forms, because they are not transitional forms in the sense that all their bodily organs are in perfect harmony with one another, and they work very properly in a very perfect order. So we cannot call those transitional forms. So we cannot talk about any evolution into the human species. The same thing is being done for explaining the horse's evolution, for example. There are many animals which look like horses. There are donkeys and other animals which, when you look at their form, look like a horse. But then many species which looked like horses or donkeys became extinct throughout the history. So if you look at the issue from that perspective, then you would believe in evolution, but that would not be something very pure and rational, because the same thing can be said about feline animals like cats, pumas, and panthers. There have been many species which lived for a certain period of time throughout history, and which looked like cats and pumas, for example, but then they became extinct. So those kinds of skeletons which are being uncovered are not necessarily transitional forms, as defined by Darwin himself. They are the skeletons of species and animals which lived for a certain period of time and then which became extinct. So we cannot accept them as proofs of the evolution, because we need real transitional forms as defined by Darwin. On the other hand, these skeletons are belonging to animals which were perfect in themselves. They were not transitional forms.
That they were perfect in themselves doesn't contradict that there were transitional forms, or that there might be transitional forms. But what alternative do you find then to Darwinism of explaining the pluralism of species and did they develop at the same time, or were they all created at the beginning of the Earth? How do you think did this happen?
Charles Darwin, in The Origin of Species, has himself said that, this is on page 520, why don't the fossils we have in our hands give us proof of the transitional and mutational evolution of the species? So he himself asks this very basic question, which is a clear statement that all the fossils he has observed give no proof of the transitional and mutational evolution of the species on this earth. And again, from The Origin of Species, Darwin asks this very basic question, which is, why can't we find any transitional forms